here we are again. Is it possible to eliminate stress? What do you think? I suppose you'll say maybe you can manage it, but it's impossible to eliminate. Well, most people think that way, and for most people, it's impossible to eliminate. However, stress is around all the time, and we can get stressed out on any given day or any given moment. We can get stressed by what we read in the media. We can get stressed with family and relationships. We can get stressed with friends or just driving on the road. There's so many different ways that stress can affect our lives. For sure, it's no easy task to eliminate it. Not if we live with what we think we know and how we've been trained to think. And the big problem is we've been trained to think for thousands of years. We've got this little head and conscious brain. And within the conscious brain, as we age, there's a lifetime of knowledge that builds up. Along with that knowledge is our education, that is a tool that accesses the knowledge, teaches us how to use it. And then we have our intellectual brain, where we think through, and we have an ego, which is our identity. And all these things are part of the human framework. It's how we live our lives. And that's the surface of how we live. We live on the surface of Earth with a conscious brain, and we have all this information stored in it, and we continue to access information on a daily basis. So if we go back to the beginning when we were born, we had parents who we were born into a religion, or maybe a non-religion, depending on what the parents believed in. So your parents' belief is how we start off in life. And once you've got that indoctrination, it's very difficult to change it as we grow up, because that's what we get used to. So we have a religion, say, and we grew up within a certain religion. And then our parents usually have some type of political viewpoint. In Britain, it's either Labour or Conservative. In America, it's Republican or Democrat. And they're similar in the way they project themselves. Democrats basically is supposed to be for and Labour is for the working people and the downtrodden, and the Republican and the Conservative supposed to be more for the middle classes. That's how people perceive it to be anyway. But it really isn't like that, but that's the way they perceive it to be. So usually the way things are today in America, probably in England too, 50% are on one side, 50% are on the other side. And depending on the viewpoints, how stretched along the curve they get, along the seesaw. If they're very dogmatic, then they're very dogmatic on one side and very hateful to the other side, and vice versa. The seesaw goes on and on throughout a person's life. And anything that goes on within that seesaw is going to stress them out, especially if it's not going in their favor. So in America, we had 4 years of Mr. Trump, and on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats who disliked him, some hated him, were all wound up with what he was doing. And for sure, he was an aggressive man and that was his style. His style was to not take anything sitting down, and he was an aggressive style of leadership. Half the country liked that, half the country doesn't like that. He wanted to make America great again. And some people believed in that, some people didn't believe in that. That's just basics of what goes on in politics. These are facts. I'm not taking anything out of. I'm doing it from the hub I'm not going up and down with the seesaw. I'm talking about it in a natural way and a neutral way. So that's the way politics work. And then we've got hundreds of religions in the world today, and all the different religions, even in like Christianity, there's 400 religions just in Christianity itself. So each religion is divided up into sections, so whether it be Muslim or Jewish, there's not quite as many in the Jewish religion. It's Orthodox, it's conservative, liberal, and a few other on this side. So it's a smaller religion. There's only like 12 million Jews left in the world today. In Christianity, there's a few billion. In Islam, there's a few billion. So they are strong religions, and people who are in it are mostly good people, follow a moral code of living, but some of them become extreme. When there's extreme in any religion, it usually follows that a war will pursue, because the extremists want to eliminate the infidels. Again, not speaking out of turn, that's the way history works. Now, maybe most people today really don't care about politics and they don't care about religion. They're trying to just live their life as easy as they can possibly live it. But is it that easy? Now, a lot of people fall into bad habits. The bad habits could be overeating, obesity, which can cause cancers, heart attacks, diabetes, and those are medical facts. And then there's other lifestyles like smoking cigarettes or cigars, drinking alcohol to excess, or even drinking alcohol at all, because alcohol is a registered poison. And social drugs or medications. Both the drugs that become habit forming. And it could be depressive drugs that people are hooked on. And there's many different types of drugs that people get hooked on. So again, those are habits that people get into, and those are obvious that we can see, and people can get treated mainly for those addictions. However, there is a form of habit that isn't so obvious, and this is what this little talk is all about. And what I'm saying is habitual thinking. The habit of thinking. The habit that we've got used to. Each person has got his own identity and thinks in the way that they've been taught. They've been taught by mostly other people or what they've read, and they've gathered information from other people. Now, some of it may be sound, but a lot of it could be very erroneous. And once the condition is lodged in our memory banks, then that becomes our reference points in our life. And as we age, those reference points become stronger, and our viewpoints become stronger along with it, until the stage comes where we succumb to an illness. We've got to go to doctors, we've got to have medications, maybe operations, and then life doesn't become so enchanting, because with all this, there's side effects attached to it. Now, there is a way of preventing that, and we'll get into that in a few moments. So, illness can be prevented. It's to prevent health, most types of illness. Now, we've also got COVID at this moment in time, which is a pandemic going around the whole of the universe, the whole of the earth. So sometimes that can't be prevented. People catch the virus, even though they take a lot of precautions. They might have gone shopping, maybe touched something, touched their eyes, and then bingo, they caught the virus. So that's easily spread. But if we have an awareness and we protect ourselves with glasses, maybe a shield, masks, and do all the precautions of washing hands, etc., and now getting vaccinated, then there's a good chance we can eliminate the dangers of actually catching that particular virus. But there's variants to it, and that's spreading, and it's still greatly an unknown. Should that stress us out? No, not if we're taking the precautions and if we understand what is actually going on, because it's actually going on and you can't stop what's going on. We cannot stop anything that's going on around us. Maybe in our own vicinity of our own house, in our life that we're living, we have some kind of control over that. But the question I would ask people is, do you control your thoughts, or do your thoughts control you? And if the thoughts are controlling you, then you do not have control over your thoughts. Now, most people think they do have control over the thoughts. And if I ask them, do you worry? And say, yeah, sure, it's only natural to worry. And I say, no, it's not natural to worry. It's normal to worry today. But it ain't natural. That's not how nature intended us to live. So if it's not how nature intended us to live, and we don't have to live with worry, how can we eliminate it? Well, it's very easy to eliminate it, but it's not easy to accept the formula for eliminating it. Why isn't it easy to admit it? Well, the simple answer is because we are all stupid. Now, that sounds like a derogatory statement. It's not. It's the most invigorating statement that we could possibly know. It's inspirational to know that we've got stupidity running through our heads. It's the only place where it exists. There's no stupidity in our body until it starts to change its dynamics. And once it becomes cancerous, yes, that's not very good for us. Or heart attacks. That's brought on by stupid thoughts, by stupid eating habits, by stupid ways of putting ourselves in danger. If you say it's not stupid to overeat or drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes, when it says on the packet it can kill you, then your cleverness is running your life. And your habitual thinking has taken over from the wisdom, the intelligence, and the truth that you were born with. Every cell in our body functions with truth, with wisdom, and with intelligence. That's how we operate. This is a magnificent universe. It's a mini universe, and it was created and evolved by the whole of the universe, of the intelligence that filters through it all. It's infinite and it's filled with energy. And so are we. We are infinite and we are filled with energy, which is filled with intelligence. That's how we are living in our daily existence as human beings. But the human being is only finite. It isn't infinite. So we have a very limited time on Earth. And that's the whole crux of the matter. Because no matter what, no matter lasts. And one of the questions that philosophers would ask themselves is, how do you define consciousness? Because we have a conscious brain and there's a conscious, unified consciousness in the universe. Now, consciousness cannot be defined because it's a nothing. There's no form to consciousness. Just as there's no form to wisdom, intelligence, and truth. It filters into wisdom, intelligence, and truth by what it connects to. And when it comes to consciousness, consciousness produces things, produces thought, produces ideas. So the ideas can be examined. What it actually produces can be seen and defined. But consciousness itself cannot be defined. So what come first, the matter or the mind? Did the mind come first or did the matter come first? Well, it really doesn't matter which comes first, because matter is what we are, and we have a mind which is universal. And the brain contains the matter and the mind. And we operate with that. So I'm not going to get too complicated into mind and matter. That's for astrophysicists to discuss, and they're not going to find it out from science. Well, certainly not from science, and certainly not from what we think we know, because cleverness can't define it. Intelligence can, because it lives it. But intelligence doesn't need to define it, because that's what it is. And if we live what is, then we don't have to define what isn't. And what isn't habitual thinking. We don't have to define it because it's not true. None of habitual thinking is true. Once you become hooked into a way of thinking that's creating stress, then you're being hooked into illusions. And all those illusions called collective negative emotions. And the negative emotions that they contain is fear, anxiety, worry, hate, jealousies, and all that is part of our habitual thinking. And if you don't have habitual thinking, then you can't be attached to any of that. And if you're not attached to any of that, you can't get any stress. Now, what we do have are feelings. And our feelings contain two elements. They contain love and joy. And love and joy is our true identity. That is who we are. That is our eternal way of being. That's our infinite self. And it is filtered through intelligence, truth, and love. And it contains no form. It contains intelligence and it contains energy. And the intelligence and the energy is defined by religion as a soul. That's how you want to define it in religious terms. In scientific terms, they haven't got any definition of it at all. They don't know what intelligence is, wisdom. You try and find that from a scientist and ask him what is intelligence, what is wisdom. And they'll run a million miles away from you because they can't define it. No true scientist who studies science, and they'll tell you that themselves. So it's not definable by science. Same as truth. Absolute truth is not definable in science. Now you can define relative truths. You can define the way we operate our lives as human beings. Well, that's what we're doing now. And we haven't got the answers to eliminate stress from that. Go to a psychiatrist and psychologist, they're not trained to eliminate stress. They're trained to manage stress. And if it gets extreme, then they've got to give medications. And when it gets extreme, then they actually have to take the medications because it now becomes out the hands of the person who's experiencing the depression. So when things go too far, science does a fantastic job. Medical science is incredible at keeping us alive. And I'm all for it. But there's a way of preventing ourselves to get into that state. And if we can prevent ourselves getting into that state, then we can live a life on earth totally stress-free. Are you willing to do that for yourself? Or do you want to say everything I'm saying is stupid? Well, actually, everything I'm saying is stupid because I'm stupid. And everything that I've experienced in my life that I didn't care for, I did it because I was stupid. I fell into holes. But once I fell into those holes and got anxiety, got a fear, or whatever that was, I analyzed it and said, I don't want to live like that. That's not for me anymore. And it didn't last long when I actually was doing it because I had a natural inbuilt crap detector. Everybody has. We're all born with that. But we don't want to recognize it because we don't want to face the truth. And that's the big problem. People say they want to know what the truth is, but in reality, they really don't, because the truth interferes with their intellect ego. and it interferes with what they think they know. And if a person thinks they know a lot, and the more they think they know, the harder it is to break that down and to admit that we're stupid. It really is that difficult. And for nearly every clever person I speak to and for being interviewed, and I say, I'm stupid, immediately they'll say, how can you be stupid? You've written 17 books. The deep philosophy of life. Well, I was able to write those books because of my stupidity, not in spite of it. Because the way I've lived my life without having an education, leaving school at 16, so I've now had a full education at university, and I've read no books. So what I've written hasn't come from the normal way of education. And the greatest compliment I've ever been paid was a friend of mine who was dean of 2 universities. I went to junior school with him. And when we met up later in life, after 3 hours of talking together, he said, Michael, you're totally untainted by education. That's the greatest compliment anybody's ever paid me. And it's the reason why I can live stress-free. Because the education hasn't tainted my life. Now, when we're talking about stupidity, we're not talking about ignorance. We're talking about we do stuff and we do it without actually really thinking about it. We do it because we analyze it through our cleverness. But if we step back a little and think, well, maybe I'm stupid enough to go along with what I've just said I'm going to do, but what would the outcome be? And we could do it with a piece of paper and draw a line down it, cut pros and cons, or we can take a little bit more time and not be reactive to situations, become proactive to those situations and analyze what is going on. And then, because we know we're stupid, we've stepped back and not rushed into something, and then we can get quite a good result, sometimes a brilliant result. We can get brilliant ideas. But if we think we're clever to begin with, and like the meltdown of the collateral rights notes in 2008, like all the people rushing into the stock market now, high valuations, and all the other stuff that's going on with the Robin Hood and Reddit and all those stocks, all those people are going to lose most of their money. That's a given guarantee. Why? Because they always have in the past and they always will in the future. Because overvaluation is overvaluation. And that's not the basic fundamentals the way financial markets work. But it's the way our habitual thinking works. And we get used to buying on dips over many years, higher in valuations. That's just one example of how habitual thinking becomes destructive to our wealth. I've mentioned earlier to our health, how habitual thinking becomes destructive to our health with cancers, heart attacks, and all the modern day diseases because of our lifestyle and what we think we should be putting into our mouth, what we should be drinking, and most of all, what we should be thinking. Because if the thinking's wrong, everything else is going to be going wrong with the body as it ages. Well, some people say, I don't care. I've only got one life to live. I want to eat what I want to eat. Da-di-da-di-da. Well, that's okay until the moment comes when they're diagnosed with a major illness. And then all that stuff try and change it. And a lot of times it's too late. They've gone down the slippery slope too far. So that's why I'm giving this talk. And it means that you've got a chance to listen to it and to read Cutting Truths, to read The Joys of Live Alchemy, to read a few of the other books, Well, Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well, and give yourself a chance to go over that over many years. You can't change overnight your thinking. Nobody expects anybody to do that. You've lived so far with what you think you know, but slowly but surely, if you wanted to read those books, they'll never be advertised. They'll never be using PR to convince anybody. I'm not telling you to actually go and do that, but if this is a talk that you can listen to, but it's not going to explain in detail how we can overcome the stupidity of who we are. because we've got to analyze basically what we're not. Because what we're not is all meaningless stuff. We've got to analyze it to understand why it's so meaningless. And then when we understand what we're not, then we know we're living what we're not by our habitual thinking. It might not make sense to you at this moment in time, but it will. And this is not gilding the lily, and you won't hear this on very many podcasts or many talks. This is something that actually works. It works in everybody's life if they're willing to take the step backwards. But if you're not, then enjoy what you've got. You know, this is nothing for me to prove. I don't have to go out and prove what I'm saying because I know it works. It's just a change of adapting our brain to connect to a source of silence that can re-educate us and to filter in new creative thoughts on a daily basis to replace the old worn out thoughts. New lamps for old, become of the alchemist. I've got a poem I could have been reading about that, but I'm not going to do any poetry today. So I think that is as far enough as I want to go with this talk today. If you want to play it back a few times, you quite a bit of complicated stuff in it, I understand that. If you've got any questions, you can always contact me through my website. The books are on my website, pointoflife.com. This is a live stream going out, but there's nobody listening to it at this moment in time. And the only people that will listen to it is the people who find it. Because again, it'll never be advertised, there'll be no PR, but it might be mentioned on social media occasionally. So for now, I reckon it's time to end it. And maybe some good will come from it. Maybe nobody will ever listen to it, but I've enjoyed it. Bye-bye for now.